Section 1.3, Experimental Design. So this section is just an introduction to experimental design. In college you can take entire courses in experimental design. In this brief intro course we're just going to get a few of the basics. So this is how to actually design an experiment or survey so that they are what we call statistically sound. Experimental design is a very involved process, so this is just a small introduction. So some guidelines for planning a statistical study. So some of these things go back to the very first section that we looked at. So identifying the individuals. So again, who is going to be in your study? So identify the individuals that you're interested in. Realize that you can only make conclusions for these types of individuals. As an example, if you use a fertilizer on certain genus of plant, you can't say how that fertilizer would work on other types of plants. However, if you diversify too much in your study, then you may not be able to tell if there really is an improvement since you have too many factors to consider at the end of the day. Step 2 is to specify the variable. So again, that we talked about also in section 1.1. The who was the individuals and the what was the variable. So you want to make sure there is something that you can measure and make sure that you control for all other factors too. As an example, if you're trying to determine if a fertilizer works by measuring the height of the plants on a particular day, you need to make sure that you control how much fertilizer you put on the plants, which would be the treatment in this case, and make sure that all the plants receive the same amount of sunlight, water, and temperature. So if you're wanting to see if the fertilizer works, we're going to put different amounts of fertilizer on different sets of plants, but then we want to try to keep all other things that affect how much it grows, the sunlight, the water, and temperature, the same for all of those plants. Then we want to specify the population. Okay, so there's another key vocabulary word from our first section. This is important in order for you to know what conclusions you can make and what individuals you are making the conclusions about. Then you're going to specify the method for taking measurements or making the observations. Determine if you need to take a census or a sample. Again, most of the time we'll be looking at samples. Again, census, we would have to, measure something about the entire population, which if the population is small enough, that's feasible. But most of the time we do rely on data from samples. So if you're taking a sample, then we need to use the previous section and decide on a sampling method. Then we collect the data, and then we're going to use the appropriate descriptive statistics methods and making decisions using the appropriate inferential methods. And these will depend on the type of data. So whether it's qualitative or quantitative will then determine which type of descriptive statistics and inferential statistics methods that we use. And then the last one, number 8, is to note any concerns you might have about your data collection methods and list any recommendations for the future.